it's time that you knew there's someone there who's searching for you, and it's time that you believe he's gonna find you.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Two Guys Fixing the World. My name is Mark Stallard, and with me is my good friend Ryan Jans. How you doing, old chum?
Oh, I'm doing great tonight there, Mark. We are in the home stretch of our Senate series, coming up on our last and final episode. Today, we're not going to have as much information heavy as we have been for the last couple episodes. This is going to be a lot of opinions and a lot of our thoughts on actual reformation of the Senate or fixing the Senate. So it's actually going to be two guys fixing the Senate.
Yes, we're fixing.
Crack the knuckles and... Yeah.
Ooh! Ow! Jesus! Oh, that was lovely. That was lovely. We just lost a whole load of viewers. We lost a whole load of listeners now because of that. All right. So don't forget, everyone. You can catch all the details of these shows and the show and past shows at fixingtheworld.ca. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, or whatever you crazy kids are doing these days. Okay. So I want to. So we are fixing the Senate with an episode entitled, rather cool title, well done, Ryan, Patching a leaky ship with bubblegum and corkboard. It's way better the way you wrote it rather than the way I said it.
That's all right. We made it through. So I guess it does come into there. We talked about Senate scandals. We talked about conflicts of interest. Obviously, we have a leaky ship. And the reason that we get passionate about stuff like this is because the idea of a second rereading and review of law is important. It is actually very important, and it actually could be a very effective way for us as a nation to pass law that benefits all Canadians, not just the rich and powerful and elite and people who have rich buddies. It could actually do what it's supposed to do. It just doesn't. So, without some further ado, we're going to take a look and see. Mark, first question: should the Senate be saved?
No. All
right, thanks everybody for joining us. Like, subscribe, and share.
And and it's time that you knew. Oh, no, I see. All right, sorry, the closing music. Anyway, whatever. No, I think that I don't see anything other than the purpose for it being there, which the reason, the big reason that we're given why it's there makes sense. I'm just not seeing any benefit in keeping the system keeping this as an institution, as it is, because I'm not sure what we would really do. Can we patch it? Is there anything that we can keep? That's a value. Is there anything that it's doing that we can say, yeah, that's the thing we want to keep, and we just change the things around it. And it goes to an old biblical proverb, right? Was you can't patch an old wine skin with new leather or with a new patch, because it shrinks, it'll break, and you end up with a bigger hole, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And I would tend to agree with you, and that also leads to the obvious question: does the reform of the Senate demand reform of the parliamentary process?
Does it? Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that I would put it that way. But
okay.
I think both of them.
So let's unpack that. Let's. What do you think?
Well, I think it's more of a. Do both of them need to be reformed or changed? Yes. I think maybe it was just the way that you phrased the question. Perhaps the order of things should be that the laws are created and then it gets filtered through. So to say that should the Senate's, I mean, it's the way you worded it was kind of backwards.
Okay.
But I don't think one necessarily precludes the other. We could have a perfectly functioning government, lower house, and we could have a really corrupt and non-functional upper house, and vice versa, right? They are supposed to be separate. Yeah, so that's. I think that we are in the state we're in because the system was set up to be biased. The system wasn't set up just like it is in the UK, where the Queen, where the Queen selects the House, and the whole idea was that we had the House of Commons, we had the Commoners ruling, but then you got to have the unelected Lords, literally the House of Lords. We had to have the Lords, the landowners, the people that owned the property, that had the power. They're the ones who are then to vet what the little people do and the insignificants, and they can change and block stuff if they want to. Daddy, parents looking after the children, really. That's kind of the condescending way I kind of feel about it. It is a condescending system.
That's not an I think there's lots of people that share that opinion, and what little I know about British Parliament, that would tend to also fall in line with what I view there. But we're here to talk mostly Canadian politics, but we do have some crossover here. I think the Senate is necessary, but I think in the form that it is, just like you do, I think it's almost broken beyond repair.
Yeah.
I pose these questions to get the ball rolling. So the question is, and when we talk about things like electoral reform or any type of reform, should we be just scrapping it and starting anew? Or should we try and salvage what's there? Well, if I'm salvaging a chamber is full of representatives that are or full of senators that are appointed by people that I didn't necessarily vote for, and who are not acting in the best interest of the area they supposedly represent, then I don't think they're worth having. So, we do have some thoughts about how to change that, but I think we should probably camp on this one a little bit more and sort of flesh out this idea here.
Yeah, we have a system that's that the people of Canada, however we define those, do not have any say in who's in that position. So I mean, to joke, to be serious and say Canada's a democracy is a joke when we have an unelected Senate. Even if they do let most of the laws go through, that they have it in their power to block them, right? We're not going to, and when you've got any situation where you've got unelected people that have a veto, even though a group of people have to vote on it, then you don't have a democracy by definition. Mm-hmm. So any system that has unelected people making decisions, no, they make bad decisions.
Democracy, then.
Yeah, I mean, what happens if we have a whole load of idiots in there who steal money and expenses and stuff? What can we do to get rid of them?
Well, we actually do have a whole bunch of idiots in there who steal money
and that's why I said it. But how do we get them out? We can't get them out. They're not get outable. At least with the lower house, we have at least the facade or the pretension that we can vote someone else, even though it's really impossible to get really difficult rather, to get an elected official out. But at least we've got the semblance of the possibility of doing it. There isn't even the hope in the Senate. They're there, and they're there. I'm not even sure what the lifespan is of the position there in the Senate.
The position is held for life.
Excellent.
Yes, it is. That's one of the things that we forgot to mention. That position is held for life until you either retire or you, I think it's age 75.
Okay.
That's the life.
Okay.
So that's 45 years. If you went in at 30, and you held it for life, you were 75. You were in there for 40 years.
Yeah.
That's insanity. And if you're corrupt, which a lot of them are, 40 years of corruption.
Yep. With no chance of the people of Canada getting parole.
Yeah.
Right? We're stuck with them.
Exactly.
We are being punished. Yeah. So that's, so I'm not really sure, is there any way we can save that system?
And I would have to agree with you. I think
Yeah.
at this point it kind of has to be torn down and rethought. And we have to come up with better qualifications and better things.
Yeah.
So then the question then becomes, and this was actually written wrong in my notes, and I apologize for that, Mark. There's a statement here, or it was a question. It's like, should Parliament write laws to appease senators? No, that's what's going to happen if this system continues. You're not writing the laws for the benefit of the people. You're writing them for the benefit of your ace in the hole, so to speak, the guy who's for sure going to say, yeah, no, this is fine. Let's send it back down to Parliament so that they can ratify it.
Yeah, we've got along those lines. We have the problem that it's the people in power that have put these people into power, and they, there's a whole idea of reciprocity. So you're more likely to do something for someone if they've done something to you, for you rather, regardless of how small it is. Right? This is documented in a lot of social science studies. So if something's coming down the pipe, and particularly if currently we have a Liberal Prime Minister, and that Liberal Prime Minister just happened to put these particular people into that position, they're more likely to vote for him than not, because he gave them, or the Liberal Party gave them, their position. And that's a dangerous place. That's a dangerous place to be, particularly with people with potentially so much power,
who can't get out. Right.
Well, we can't get out.
We can't get them out. Who are in there for a minimum of 40 years, and so now we don't have a way to get somebody out who isn't just going to vote, or basically vote for whoever's going to give them what they want.
Yep. I just want to clarify. I just wanted to correct you there. A maximum of 40 years.
So yeah, you were correct. Maximum.
Yeah. Just in case, you can just see the comments.
Yeah, exactly. It won't be the first time that people will correct me in the comments. I'm well aware of that, and I'm happy to be corrected, as long as it's actually corrected.
Right.
Corrective. Right. So.
Yeah. So in line with that, then a question for you then. They're there effectively for life, if not literally, at least effectively. Should senators be a term position then, assuming we keep them on?
Okay, yeah. So was there anything else you're going to add to that before I launch?
No, that was my main. You had some other comments. You had some other list on the end, but that's should it be a term position? Would that be better?
I think so. I think if you have a rotating term and you fill it with a mix of all parties, it's required. So if you have a party who gets seats after you get a certain number of qualifying seats, right, you now have to send one person from that. So if you have, I'm just spitballing here. So we have 333 seats in our house, I think, right? Anyways,
sure.
Doesn't matter.
I'll take your word for it. Yes.
Yeah, it's around 300 seats. If you have a certain number of, if you're over 20, you have to elect one person from your party to go sit in the Senate.
Okay.
And obviously that's going to cater. That's not the best solution, but it's at least a better solution.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to write things like caps. So like if you have 171 seats to form your majority government. We lost listeners again.
Yeah, that was the stream. Everybody, we're streaming.
Yeah, that's right. That was some technical.
Even though we're not streaming, but
but you'd have to have caps so that your majority doesn't send five people. So you each person has to send one, so that you have or something along those lines. Or you do it the other way. If you have a low amount of seats, you send more people to the Senate, so that your voices can actually be heard in the review process. Right? You sort of turn that on its ear. There's ways that you can do it.
Right.
Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, that sounds incredibly undemocratic. If you've got stick with the party system, and we have a majority government, but the second house is going to be full of parties that oppose them, who weren't elected into that position. How are we in any better position than we were with people who were selected? Particularly, I mean, you can see how it works in the US currently, where stuff's getting, stuff potentially gets blocked by one party or the other, particularly if the House is elected. One side Republican, the other side is Democrat, and we've had the same thing happen in the United Kingdom as well, where Brexit's been blocked at every the votes on Brexit has been blocked. So because you've got one group of people that don't want it over another, and so when you've got those kinds of, although the British version is not quite the same kind of idea, but if you've got two opposing houses, nothing is going to get through. It will be the same thing as having a minority government. It's what we mentioned actually in the I think which show it was, but it was when I said to my
episode 2.
And I said to my dad when I said to my dad was when I was younger, this will be the 1970s, and in my knives, I said, well, why can't we just have both parties or all the parties in there, and they can just talk it out and come up with what's best? The naivety, nothing will get done, right? And that was a bit of an eye opener for me, that they won't do anything, and so I don't want to see that as being, and I think that doesn't take into account the point of that house. Are they representing the people? Or are they representing the parties?
Correct.
Right.
And
So
we've already discussed that parties don't necessarily have their people's.
And again, just for the sake of the arguments, we're talking about the Senate, not the House of Commons, right? Not the. So.
So then, I'm willing to concede the weakness of my point. What would you suggest then as a mechanism to keep that level of I don't want to call it corruption, because then it's corruption, but that level of apathy, of governmental apathy? Right.
Well, we got to, first of all, they have to be voted in. There has to be short terms, and each seat should be up for grabs by anybody that wants to run, party or independent, and they have to be, and they would be challenged, and no one gets to, and there should be some kind of primary within the party, so that members of the party, and however they do it, vote on who would have that seat. Just like they have started to do now in, they currently do for the most part in the US. We hear about it a lot, right, with the presidential primaries. It's starting to happen a little bit in the UK as well. I don't think that happens here. If you're an MP, you don't get challenged by your own party. And I think that I think that's
the only time you get challenged is when you do something wrong.
Yeah, and the people should be the people in the party, or regard, let them. I'm not sure how it should be done, but they should be challenged, and they should have to run for every term. They shouldn't just be given a free run to represent that party or that particular area, because you get someone that's stuck in. You get career politicians, and career politicians stop caring. They stop caring about the people that they're supposed to be serving. If they ever cared before. So what I would see for a second house is a completely different system. So you would have something that has to be ethically and completely separate and from the House of Parliament. Right, from the second house, it has to be. You have to have different parties, different organisations with different leaders. So then there would be no collusion would be allowed between the parties. If they have, if they see eye to eye on certain things, fine, but there cannot be any direct collusion between those parties. There must be walls, almost literal walls between those two, and then we run elections for the Senate, and we would obviously change the rules on qualifications and what disqualifies. Now, the reason I say that is because it's the mess that the UK is in. I just seen recently, again, I may have mentioned this in a previous show, but they have a system where they've got local council governments, and that's they have boroughs. So you'll have maybe a town or two, certainly a whole lot of surrounding villages. That would be a borough, which then you'll have many boroughs inside a county council, and then you'll have your federal government, as we would call it. Not sure what you call it. The central government, anyway. So they have their parties. There are multiple parties, there's really only two parties. They're Labour and Conservatives. The Lib Dems are the next biggest one, but they're never going to form a major government. And neither are any of the other parties, regardless of, yes, you can look at us and say, oh, look, we all have three parties. How great that is. And the US only has two. Well, we effectively have two parties. But in the UK, it's the same party for all three levels of government. And so if you've got a Conservative council, if you've got a Conservative borough council, you've got a Conservative county council and a Conservative Prime Minister, Boris Johnson runs the whole damn country from top to bottom. Rather than just the federal, we have effectively the same government. So when you've got policies, ideologies that are driving these people, that goes right down to the bottom, right down. And so you're not really running yourself. Right now, I've got Boris Johnson running specific towns effectively. He is the leader of that town, whether you like it or not. And we don't want that. That's just so rife for corruption and for pushing through nasty ideology that Theresa May, who was the previous Prime Minister, decided that they're going to take on the same thing that the North American, both Canada and the US have been trying to fix elections by putting these voter ID laws on. So thousands of people were unable to vote, and they were able to force that at the borough council level because the people at the top were running the place. It's insane. So anyway, right, I'm going way off on a tangent there, but the point is it has to be separate. If we're going to go with the party system, they have to be separate parties that are not allowed to have any connection with each other at all. And if they do, then they must be dissolved. Prosecutions and all that. There can't be any collusion.
Yeah,
and then that's the only way you're going to.
Then the question is, okay, so I actually don't think that's a bad idea, but just to throw a spin on that, would it be a good idea for a term position for, like, say, a judge or a particular type of jurist to fill that in, even on a short-term basis? Right?
How do you mean?
So instead of having a different party system,
okay,
you look at your circuit court judges, right,
okay,
at all tier levels, and say that because this is about passing law, and judges should know law, you take a judge out of the circuit court, just one from every, or a couple from every layer, at random, and they serve in the Senate for one session, and then they go back, and then they come back, and obviously you can't make sure that they're not tied up in major trials and stuff like that, right? Especially when you get to things like Supreme Court. But would it be better to have jurists serve in that senatorial position instead of electing a senator to serve in that position?
No, I kind of like the direction you're taking that. I would say not to jurors, and because I think there's at least one of these two people who are presenting the show has found a way out of being a real juror.
Okay, fair enough.
Guess who that is?
It's not me, because I've never been called to jury duty. So there's only one other person.
So when you select, particularly when it comes with no pay, or I've got to take a pay cut, right? And I'm not keen to do it. There are problems with that. I mean, and then you've got if we do then have jurors and we're paying you a lot more than you're making now, how long they're going to do it for? Are they going to have a job when they're done, and all that other stuff? So there are lots of other things. But what I do like, though, is what you kind of got me thinking about. I just thought of this. I'm sure somebody else has kind of thought about something on the long. There's nothing new under the sun. Someone else has probably already come up with this. But wouldn't it be best? We have a Supreme Court. That's all great. Wouldn't it be best to have a house of again, they should be elected, and they should be short terms. We can have lots and lots of rules around that, because there are problems with having more judges that are there to judges and lawyers, just like we'd have with the Supreme Court, who are there to vet the laws to see how legal it is, and maybe a filter to see how this is going to affect, and who is going to be affected by this, and what the real outcome is likely to be. So more of a scientific approach rather than an emotional, political approach is what we would likely get
So
in a party.
effectively using the pure the scientific the inductive scientific method of peer-to-peer supported research instead of using senatorial and House laws and having two functioning bodies of government.
Right.
You actually have experts who come in and review the law.
Yeah,
and that's the question that we had sort of, or not the question, but the thing that we had sort of really harped on. Man, you don't have to have a law degree to be a senator, but you are going to review law.
Right.
So, and if you're essentially being paid, and I say that you can't see me do this, but I'm doing the air quotations, being paid by the party that has the most interest, or being appointed by the party that has the most interest in you, you aren't actually going to look very closely at that law. And you are only beholding to the people who put you there, not the people who elected the official who put you there.
Right. Yeah. And, and it becomes more of a, I don't want to say a civil service role, because I don't like the idea of that either, but it would be more of, looking at this from just a purely legal view with a leaning to the what the logical outcomes are likely to be. And there are going to be lots of grey areas, but yeah, this is legal. This is not going to overturn any other laws, and this is not going to take away certain rights like voting rights, right? So if you do these voter ID laws, they seem quite simple and seem quite reasonable, and you realize, hang on a minute, but the voter ID laws actually cut a big chunk of the population out from voting, right? That's the kind of thing that this is being done for good reasons, that is not going to take away other people's rights and and hurts the majority. Just something along those lines. Again, for the listener, I haven't just kind of running with this as it came to me, but something like that kind of appeals to me.
Right.
Not set on it.
The other mechanism that I have written down here, should it be mandatory if we're not going to move to what we had just talked about, which I think is a far superior. Obviously, because I dreamed it up. Obviously, I love it, but I think it also offers a very balanced type of situation. But should it be mandatory for the Senate to have representatives from all parties? Period.
Yeah. I think I've kind of answered that one already.
Yeah, I think you have. Let's just flesh it out a little bit more.
Yeah. So, it's the world is made up with way more than parties. Do we say? The independents that run. So do we have a selection of independents? And if we're going to say yes, we should have a selection of independents, because there are probably hundreds of independents running that don't get in, but should they be represented here? It's kind of difficult, right? And then so who's going to be there? It's just going to be the big two parties. They're the ones that are going to have the most, if we're going to be proportional to the votes, they're the ones who are also going to be running the House. It just seems to be stacking. We may as well just not have a House if we're going to have a similar amount of people from the same parties, or percentages in both houses. We may as well not have the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you there. Again, it's just it's not so much the whether or not that mechanism is right. It's just a matter of exploring different mechanisms to try and bring as much balance and representation, because it is a good idea. It's always a good idea to review law before it gets passed. The last thing you want is for governments to pass law when they shouldn't. And so when you think about it's easy to pick on the states because their laws just get so publicized.
Yeah, that's it, really, isn't it?
You look at if you look at the Patriot Act, it's the easiest one to pick apart, because it was like, hey, we're going to sneak this law in that says, hey, we're going to give all these cooperative powers to the NSA and the CIA and the FBI, and we're all going to work, and we're going to protect the nation by spying on all its peoples. We'll profile you. If we think you're bad, we're going to go in without a warrant. that needs review.
Yep.
And that needs to go to review. But they don't review it. And it's so easy. They use this emotional moment. Yes, America's been attacked. Yes, you need your security divisions and you're protecting homeland security and all that stuff. That's necessary if you've got legitimate threats. But you can't just arbitrarily arrest people without warrants.
Right.
That needs to be out of there. Right?
Yeah.
And the language that it's written in is just subject to such interpretation, and the interpretation of high-paid lawyers who can protect the America, but when you try to find the loophole in that, you're screwed.
The reason you can't find a loophole in a law that will benefit you is because it wasn't written into it. All loopholes are written into it. They're not accidental. They're not mistakes.
Oh yes, that's for sure.
They're not mistakes. If it was a mistake, it's not a loophole.
That's right. And it will be fixed. Hey, look, then all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to fix capricious law here. But it benefited me, but now it benefits you. So
yeah, then you'll get we've already seen that, where we had the Conservatives fight here in Manitoba for election terms, right? And then they went and completely disregarded it for the last election for no reason. Just because there was another election happening as well, and blah blah blah.
Well, what ends up happening is he was tactic. Okay, so we've talked about, or at least we gave a preview of one of the topics that we'll talk about in voting and tactical voting. He's Pallister here in Manitoba basically called a tactical election. My polls are good, but I may not be good in another year, so I'm not going to pay attention to election terms. I'm just going to call an election because I have a better chance of getting in.
Yep. And there were laws put in place because the Conservatives, and not just the big C Conservatives, but little C Conservatives all care about the BS of fiscal responsibility, which is another way of taxing the poor and tax breaks for the rich. And it was with the they actually to have been written into law here in Manitoba that if the deficit is at a certain point, the ministers and the elected officials cannot get a pay raise, and so the NDP government that we had here for 17-odd years drove up the deficit, and they stuck to the law. As soon as Pallister comes in, he freezes minimum wage because there's a depression coming, and then completely overlooks and said, "Well, we didn't cause the deficits to be so high. We should be punished." And so he gave himself a $20,000 a year pay raise. Sorry, that's Nick pay cut. Conservative.
Yeah, imagine they took a pay cut. No.
Yeah, and so it's a $20,000 a year, which is effectively what one person on minimum wage would make in an entire year. But he overturned a law because it suited him. How did he get away with that? I don't know. Because the government isn't supposed to be there to enforce law; it's there to make it. So who's enforcing the law on the government? Well, I don't have an answer to that. But something we can maybe look into. I don't, obviously, no one is, but
yeah, and it really does come, and that becomes a slippery slope because we all love this idea of government oversight, okay, and regulatory boards. But who looks at this? And I'll bring it back to even my industry. There was a huge controversy with the Office of the Fire Commissioner here in Manitoba, right? They are the ultimate authority having jurisdiction in all of Manitoba. So how it basically shakes out is they have says, they set the rules, they tell us which standards we use for inspections and stuff and fire protection and enforcing fire codes. There's a huge controversy. A lot of it, again, coming down to expenses and time fraud, and this is actually legit bad. Holy geez, how did you get away with this? And you realize that just everybody at the OFC was really really complicit about it and look the other way when they should have been blowing the whistle.
Right.
But who watches a government agency? The government agencies, especially one that say like the Office of the Fire Commissioner, where you don't really realize just how much they have their hands on. You go to a carnival, every single one of those rides has to be inspected to a standard by the Office of the Fire Commissioner. You go to a restaurant and there's a kitchen system that's protecting the deep fryer from starting on fire. There are standards in place that are answerable to the Office of the Fire Commissioner. In the city of Winnipeg, it's Winnipeg Fire Prevention, but they work closely with the Office of the Fire Commissioner. Like, these are the people that are watching us for public safety. And it's really easy to pick on this because it's public safety, right?
Yeah.
You go into a shopping mall and the exits are cluttered with shopping carts from the Safeway across the street. The Office of the Fire Commissioner or Winnipeg Fire Prevention is going to say you were in violation of the fire code. People cannot get out of the building if there's a fire, right? That's really practical. Who stops the Office of the Fire Commissioner from taking bribes from other areas? Who's watching them?
No.
Who's watching? So, and then who watches the watchers of the watchers, right? So it ultimately comes down to, at a certain point, yes, oversight is good. Oversight is needed. But do you oversee the overseers? And who's qualified to do that?
Right. And I mean, that'll be definitely a question worth asking. In regards to, just the two examples I gave from Manitoba, it would be a matter of upholding, just having a judge, a couple of qualified, just looking through the law. Is this the law? Is he breaking the law? Yeah, all right. Enforce it. And it doesn't have to be a body. It just needs to be someone that is versed in the law, can interpret it, get a couple, get 2 or 3 people on it, and they can do a vote. Like, kind of like a mini Supreme Court, if you like. But we do that kind of thing all the time. I mean, it happens. It happens all the time in the various areas of government and the judicial system. So it wouldn't be that much to say, yeah, that's not legal. If you want to do something different, you have to pass an act. You've got to pass an act in the House. And again, it was just a handful of judges that just happened to be qualified to review this and do their public the public scrutiny. Here it is. We've examined it. There are going to be, obviously, people will could challenge it. Someone questions it. Hang on, this is against the law here. And then bang, let's have a little hearing. Yeah,
and then it does also bring up that really interesting point. Government is there to make law. Are they there to follow it? Are they immune to that?
Well, they're not there to enforce it, right? I mean, really. There are cases where they would make a decision, bang, there's a law, but they're not the ones that are going to come break down on your door and arrest you, right? Mm-hmm. Think about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And all the Manitoba Fire Code is not created by the Office of the Fire Commissioner. They enforce that code. The Manitoba Fire Code is created by the government of Manitoba. I think Emergency Services. It has Underwriters Lab of Canada. There's a lot of National Building Code that's in there, right? These are all laws for building buildings, right? But it's not the Office of the Fire Commissioner who writes that law. They're the ones who enforce it. They're the agency that enforces it, right? They're making sure that exits are clear and that this is what the definition of a fire detector is, and this is the difference between this and that, and where they should be used and how that's applicable, right? And so they're the ones that enforce the code, but they don't necessarily create it. They may have a hand in creating it and saying that it due to experience, but that's all just part of the review process anyways. Due to experience, we say that this should be this way, and then they could write that as legislation, right?
Yeah. And we definitely need reviews. We definitely need oversights. And I mean, who's watching the watcher? Definitely something that we need to be considered. But I mean, these can't obviously be reasons to not do it or not.
Right.
To not.
So I think we've brought it down into land, and so to
Yep.
finish off this series on the Senate, we'll bring it back to a good old Homer Simpson quote for Homer the Vigilante, saying, "Dad, if you are policing the police, who polices then the police?" I don't know. Goat's cart? I think I butchered that. I think I butchered the quote, but I think we all know what I mean.
Don't.
Check it out. Homer the Vigilante on, I guess, Disney Plus owns The Simpsons now. So,
Yep. So monopolies, we need to talk about that as well at some point.
Yeah, we will definitely touch on that. Sure. But anyways, thank you everybody for making us a part of your day.
Thank
this
you.
has been Mark Stollard and Ryan Jantz. We are two guys fixing the world, and in this case, two guys fixing the Senate. We hope you enjoyed this series. We make these for you and your interest of yourself, and also for ourselves. We just love talking politics.
Hell yes.
In sometimes ranting politics.
Well,
so everything,
best kind.
everything that we research, we like to be upfront and put on our website, fixingtheworld.ca. Like, share, and subscribe. We are on should be on all, if not all, most of the major podcast platforms. I myself listen to our program on Google, so that's a free plug for Google to all two people who are listening to us aside from myself. But anyways, like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.
We'll see you later. Thanks so much for joining us. Cheerio.
He's gonna fight you.